Good afternoon, friends. My name is Suzanne McAllister. I'm with the Post Animal Use World Project, or PAW Project, and I'm here with my colleague and collaborator, Ann Piotrowski, who is the co-founder of PAW with me. And we have started doing these recordings when something catches our interest. And in this case, I wrote an essay, I think about 4 or 5 days ago, and it was prompted by listening to an interview by Father James Martin, who is a Jesuit, speaking with Sister Helen Prejean, who is the author of Dead Man Walking and who is the person who has probably done most to advocate for death row inmates over the last 35 years. And obviously, they were not talking about veganism or animal rights, but what really struck me in listening to her was the uphill battle that she has been waging for, I think it's 3, 4, 5 decades, a long time. And what I got from her is she came to a place where she realized that she was going to just keep working, even when she was seeing very little impact from the work that she was doing. And as I wrote in my essay, she has faith on her side. And that's basically what she said, is that she does have a belief in the goodness of the world. And in her case, it's a belief in God. And I thought about it and I thought, whether I believe in God or not, and that's up for debate with me, I could take that stance of believing that what I'm doing on behalf of animals is, number one, putting something positive into the world. And I do believe that our energy is such that either we're putting something positive in the world or we're putting something negative in the world. And so, if nothing else, I know that my love for animals, my concern about how they're treated, is actually a positive thing. It's a compassionate thing. That's what I'm putting out into the world. And that I don't need to depend on seeing results. And the other part of what was really striking to me as I was listening to her and thinking about what I am doing in my life as a retired person is that we're living in this, and I can't stand this word, but unprecedented time in the United States where there is so much cruelty happening. Anyway, I think anybody who's watching this knows what I'm talking about. And so I'm being pulled. And I'm recognizing that for most people, watching a 5-year-old being kidnapped from his home as a way to serve as bait and then sent to a Texas detention center, people are very focused on that. And they're going to be less focused on the cruelty of our food system or our research system or circuses and things like that. And so that was another component of what am I doing? Why am I doing it? Does it make sense? And finding a way to deal with what can feel like helplessness. And that's what I wrote about. And we will put a link to my essay in the comments section of this. So, Anne, that was what I wrote about, and you
Yes.
had some thoughts. I'm
And I read
interested
it.
to hear them.
Yeah, even just as you're talking and describing it, I'm having some thoughts about what we've talked about before, is about how we can show up as advocates, we can show up as vegans, just whatever, whether we're doing something officially as advocates or we're just showing up to a meal with friends or family, that, um, it's kind of this letting go of the outcome. So, Buddhism has it too, right? It's this non-attachment thing of I always think of it as like uh when I'm showing up. But what did you say? You just said that it's the right thing to do, it's the good thing, it's the compassionate thing to do, and that's reason enough. But I think it's also just the honest thing to do, right?
Mm,
Because that's our kernel of truth, right? So the kernel of truth goes back to compassion. And if we to show up in the world in that way, um, is our business. That's our business.
hmm.
What someone does with that, I always think of it as like it's none of my business. Like it's not like it's none of my business, but it's kind of like as in they're hurting animals. That's none of my business. It is. I'm making it my business by paying attention to it and speaking about it. Uh, but I don't have control over it. So it's the business at hand is really what you're talking about, which is uh I think showing up with that truth, finding that center, because there's so much that can uh feel discouraging, and I mean, I don't know, I just think it can make us feel sleepy. Like just like
Sleepy is that's a good word. Like
so tired.
just pull the covers
Yes.
over. You know, it's really interesting that you say that. I had my annual physical yesterday morning, and this is the world we're living in. The woman who is my doctor's nurse, who I've gotten to know over the last couple of years, we chit chat. She wears a hijab, has 4 children, swarthy, born in this country, but Middle Eastern heritage. And I never had political conversations prior to the last couple of years. She told me she has 4 children.
Mm,
She said she drops them off at school and is afraid whether they will be there when she goes to pick them up.
mm.
And I said to her, are you having these conversations with other patients, or is it just, she
Yeah,
said, I just had somebody here earlier this morning who said, if you're not distressed by what's going on, you're not paying attention.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that's the world we're living in, which
yeah,
could cause us to be sleepy and want to just pull the cover over our eyes. Neither
right.
of us are doing that. And
We're
part
not
of what
doing
I
that.
wrote about is that
Yeah,
I'm showing up, protesting, making phone
yes,
calls, doing all that kind of
yeah,
stuff. And I don't want to lose the focus on what is dearest to my heart,
right,
which
right,
is animal rights.
right. And I, we've said to each other just how I don't see those things as like entirely separate, because I feel like fighting for democracy, for maintaining a democracy, is fighting for animals. Because if we lose that, then it's not going to do our you know it's not going to do veganism any, and it's not going to help animals if that happens. So I do think the work is related and worthwhile. But I know what you're saying, and the question is how one of the questions is how to stay um, engaged, alert, um, awake, so that we can keep showing up. In your essay, I think part of what that is kind of doing the work and then letting go of the outcome to some degree. How this relates to, so last video we talked about uh, people who, what do we do if they say something like they're too lazy to go vegan? So
Mhm.
as an example of like showing up and doing the work is us talking about that. That happened. That was something that occurred for you. We talked about it and came up with some ideas of how maybe that in that moment of showing up authentically, I'm so sick of that word, but like honestly, and with that kernel being able to gently, compassionately question that.
Right.
with a person, and just be able to say something, but then let go and let them deal with it. Let them deal with the outcome of that. They can always come back to us and
Hmm.
explore further, and we'll be there for that. But to be able to show up and hear that from someone, oh, well, I'm too lazy, respond to that in some way, and then let them deal with that. At that point, it's kind of there's where the letting go. Because what are we going to do? Continue to,
Right.
you know,
That I think brings us to the thoughts you had following that initial essay about laziness, about blind spots,
yeah,
which really rattled me because if I understood it, you basically were saying that it's a little bit of a cop out to say I'm lazy, and that really what people are saying is I just don't care that much. I don't care
yeah.
enough
And I don't mean
to
that.
change.
Right. And I don't mean that to sound so terribly harsh, because it's not even that I'm saying that with judgment, because with, like, harsh judgment, because I think also that all vegans too, we take animal suffering more seriously than non-vegans. Of course, I think that's pretty obvious. Uh, but when I think about like if what people were talking about was endorsing and subsidizing what they currently do to animals, if they were talking about doing that to people, I'd be having conversations 24/7. Like, I'd be, it would reach, like, there would be alarm bells. But I'm not saying it to shame any vegans or myself about it either, because I'm trying to understand the mechanism at play. And I really think that to some degree, like, our survival depends on some level of compliance.
Yeah.
I think that survival is our first human
That's
instinct.
it's a really good point. And I'll tell you when I use the word rattle, because it did rattle me when you said what you're just saying now. And I thought, wow, yeah, if they weren't doing to people what they're doing to animals, I would not stand for it.
Yeah,
But I am standing for what they do.
right.
And I'm not aggressive with people about my animal advocacy. It's just not my style.
Yeah.
And yet I think, well, then what are you doing?
Mhm.
If you're
Mhm.
not being a little bit more assertive, that's number one. But I think what you just said, which biologically we survived because we formed communities, groups. They
Right.
could be very small groups, and if you were banished from that
Yes.
group, there was a good chance you weren't going to live. It's
Right.
a little bit like animals who are in packs, and if one of them gets shunned, that animal is going to be picked off.
Yes.
And so I
Yes.
think it's biological, and yet not to get down on myself, but what you said really made me it caught me up short. It was like, okay, where are you with this? And do you need to be a bit more forthright?
And I think that discomfort. Remember how, like, this is something we said from
Yeah,
way early on, and that
yeah,
is, like, it's okay. Like, being uncomfortable is a good thing. It's kind of
yes,
like it's like hand in hand with growth, because I
yes,
do think I think that's what our discussion in the last video was about. Was like, when somebody says, well, it says, I'm not going to be vegan, even though I admire you for being vegan, because I'm too lazy. How can we be able to keep that? See, here's the tension of being vegan. The tension of being vegan is that we're trying to speak that kernel of truth and challenge people to see that, and we're trying to maintain these bonds at
yes,
the same time.
yeah,
And that's hard. That's really hard. And I think that the discomfort of being vegan, I mean, I think it has a lot to do with that. But this discussion and our last one, I think it really does have to do with trying to figure out how can we maintain the bond and push a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was just thinking as you were talking and thinking about Sister Prejean. Um, she was not popular in her stance, primarily because the Catholic Church, she's a sister of Saint Joseph, I think they're called. Um, and the church in the catechism was okay with capital punishment. So she was bucking the system. But I don't think anybody could argue with her about, I guess people did argue about whether the death penalty was okay or not, and they deserved it. They were bad people and so on. Um, we get such a bad rap
Yeah.
that we are focusing on the lives of animals when there are so many other things, the death penalty being one of them, that
Mhm.
should take precedence. And that's, and I guess maybe it's because the cultural layers are so deep
Yeah.
that we're trying to break through, and it creates these fissures which people do not want. They do
Right.
not want to feel the fissure.
Right. It's really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's really
So,
hard.
eh,
Even they themselves might come up with an explanation. And the explanation might be, I'm too lazy. The explanation might be that person is radical. You're extreme, you're radical if you're vegan or whatever. Because we're all trying to figure out why do I feel a little uncomfortable with that? It's because, of that reason, and some explanation that may or may not be true. It's just good enough. It's a good enough explanation to be able to go back to business as usual, maybe.
so I'm thinking that, this might be a good time to wrap up what we've been talking about. I'll tell you what I'm left with, and then you can tell me what you're left with. One is um, the difficulty of what we are trying to do. And especially somebody who's wired the way I am, I don't like people to not like me. So that's a
Yeah.
really hard thing for me because in some ways the stance I take is not popular. And so therefore I may not be popular. And then the other is to remind myself that the impact of what I'm doing is not up to me. I can try to be smarter. I can try to be more efficient. I certainly want to be more effective. But then I have to say, well, this is the best I know to do and put it out there and hope that it is, in
Yeah.
fact, having an impact.
And yes, and I will say that in the last few days, you may have gotten an email too with this because I'm not remembering where I got this information, but it was about dog racing in Scotland. Did you read anything about that?
No,
Okay,
no.
I'm going to tie it back in, but I promise. But it's that dog racing was outlawed in Scotland. Okay, so it when I saw that, it's like, okay, there is progress. So there were enough. I'm sure some people are unhappy that dog racing, but
Right.
there's enough people that it struck some kind of tipping point that
Yes.
made that change happen. And I don't know how long dog racing has been going on in Scotland, but my guess is a very, very long time. So
Yes.
change happens. It's
Yes.
just that when you have turned that corner to become vegan, when you have like now admitted to yourself that you've been participating in this really cruel system and you're making choices to not do that anymore, it can seem like these changes, the change is excruciatingly slow, and uh, that sometimes it just seems like nothing is ever going to change or it's not going to happen. But change does happen because we can point to things like dog racing in Scotland and say
Yeah.
something's happened.
Yeah.
And, that's part of it. That's part of it. Noticing that is good. I think that is a step. A theory what I talked about a while back is just that um, if more and more people, a tipping point's worth of people turned that corner into veganism, we'd have to stop having wars. And there's a whole because the thing is, you don't just say, well, I'm going to treat dogs better. You say you can't you when you're vegan, that means that you've realized that if you can't do it to dogs, you can't do it to cows,
Right,
and if you can't do it
right.
to cows, you can't do it to pigs, and if you can't do it to pigs, you realize that injustice is injustice is
Yes.
injustice, no matter what. And if you can't do it to any of them, then you can't do it to people.
Yes, so
Um,
that barrier between
yes, it
non-human
disintegrates.
animals and human animals
Yes.
disappears.
So the friends who said I'm too lazy to go vegan, they would never say I'm too lazy to stop killing people. They
Exactly.
kill people. So that layer, that wall between
Yeah.
them, other animals, and human animals disintegrates for vegans. And it's a painful process, that
Yes.
disintegration. But it means, well, that's not
That
good. I'm not going to hurt anybody. So that's what I'm
well,
left
that
with.
seems like I love that image, which the wall is crumbling, and I think that is worth another conversation about how do we begin to try to dismantle that wall.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And I
So
hope that we get to do these like videos weekly, and whoever's watching right now gets more people to watch these videos and submits questions to us either through the comments
absolutely.
or their own struggles with
Leave
it or
leave
questions.
comments for us. We would
Yeah,
love to hear whether this is helpful, if it's confusing,
yeah,
whatever. We would love to hear from
yeah.
you.
Or if it brings up other struggles that people are
Yeah,
having that they'd like us to talk about, I would love that.
that's
That would be great.
a
Yeah,
great point.
yeah,
Anyway, so good to see
yeah.
you, and
Yeah.
thank you all for listening. And yes, we would love to hear from you.
All
Take
right. Thank
care.
you.
All right.